What's up guys, Spencer Sakurai here, and in this video we're going to be doing something a little different. Instead of the usual gear review or some sort of behind the scenes of a film I'm making or something like that, today we are going to talk about some knowledge that I've learned over the past decade of being a cinematographer. You know, I've had the opportunity to work with a lot of people over my career, ranging from small clients around my market, all the way up to working with Adidas, Leon Bridges, Google, and ESPN. So I'm going to take some of that knowledge of being a cinematographer and give you 5 tips to be a better cinematographer today. So tip number 1 is vision and intention. One of the most valuable things you can have as a cinematographer is a vision or an intention. Because I think what happens when you're starting out, you're just kind of trying to film something that looks cool, something that looks fun. Maybe you're trying to replicate something that you've seen already. And you might grab your camera, you might run out and you might just start filming stuff. But really, you're going to be a much better cinematographer if you come up with your vision and intention before you start to film anything. You want to get with your director, you want to see what you are trying to accomplish, and then you want to narrow that down. You want to curate that down into an idea and a concept that you're trying to execute. There's this old saying that says, fix it in pre-production. Basically, you want to come up with all of this intent, all these ideas before you even leave the house, before you even turn on a camera, before you do anything. That way you can walk in on the day on set and have a plan to execute. And I just think it's important to hone that in. Why are you shooting this the way you're planning on shooting it? All the shoot day is really executing your vision that you've already pre-planned, that you already have in your mind. The idea is that you're just going to try to problem solve on the day to get to that vision that you already have. It's probably not wise just to wing it every time. You want to decide, are you going to have high key lighting, low key lighting? I mean, for example, if you're going to shoot something like a horror film or something like that, are you going to use high key lighting? Are you going to make it really bright? Or are you going to do low key lighting, make it dark, make it moody, add to the tone to the story? You're trying to have lots of color? Are you trying to make it more muted? What do you need to create to help tell the story better? One of your most valuable assets as a cinematographer is your ability to execute on that vision, and it really has nothing to do with the camera itself. It's what's going on in your head and what you're going to bring to the table to help better collaborate with the director to create their vision and what they're looking for. And you can definitely still be able to have creative freedom on the day as long as it's still following that vision and not straying away from it just because something looks cool. So in pre-production, creating that vision and intent is going to be a very valuable asset to you as a cinematographer. And that'll segue us right into tip number 2, which is worry less about gear. And I'm sure you've heard this before, story first, gear comes second, but that is true. Gear is fun. I talk about it a lot on the channel because I like it. I like the nuances of gear, but that's just that extra sauce to add to your vision and intent. But it's really not about what kind of gear you're using, it's how you're using it. What are you using it for? Which makes what you put in front of your camera way more important than your camera itself. And in a lot of ways, what you put in front of your camera matters way more than anything on set. This is why there's all these videos online of people being like, look what the iPhone can do. Look at this project that I shot on the iPhone. Like any camera can be good as long as your content is good and what you're putting in front of that camera lens is compelling and intriguing to an audience. And with that in mind, you could probably use any camera and not even use lights. Actually, I shot a project many years ago, and I didn't really even own a light at the time, I don't think, but I had this intent, I had this idea, I had this mood that I wanted to create. So I actually waited for the right time of year, right time of day, and used the right setting to create the vibe that I was trying to create. I actually shot the project on many different types of cameras, whichever camera worked for the setting that I needed, and I think I only shot it on like 2 lenses. The gear did not matter at all. You know, I waited for it to get cloudy outside. I made sure I had the right window lighting. I just used the natural light to create the mood on my locations. But I wouldn't have been able to do this so easily without that upfront intent that I already had when I was going to design the idea. I even shot a couple of shots like in an airport when I was flying to some other shoot, like with I think the original Blackmagic Pocket and just the lens just kind of on my hip. And obviously I didn't light anything inside the airport, but I needed those shots to better tell the story. I just encourage you to worry less about the gear and more about what you're putting in front of the camera. And to make the stuff look better that you're putting in front of the camera, you're probably going to want a little help. And that's where tip number 3 comes in. Collaborate. Collaboration is one of the biggest components to filmmaking. I know it sounds easy, you're probably eager to go out and shoot something on your own, and that's perfectly fine. And with the modern tech, you can totally do that. But there's a reason that film sets have hundreds of people on them. Aside from the fact that obviously efficiency is important, you know, it costs a lot to run a film set, so you have to have a lot of hands to make things move quickly. But outside of that, there's a lot of perspectives on set. It's kind of like a business. Sometimes you have to outsource some parts of your business to better accomplish your goal. potential to make the product even better than you could on your own. Even if you're shooting a small project in a small market, you're probably still going to have upwards of, 10 to 20 people on set to help bring that project to life. Everyone has a different background, a different perspective on lives, and you can take those perspectives and put it in a bucket. And then as the DP, you collaborate with the director to curate down those perspectives, take all those together and use those to make each frame and each image and tell the story the best you can. It's important as a director of photography to give that allowance on set to let those ideas come alive. So collaboration is the glue that sticks together. Tip number 1 and tip number 2. So I think if I went back in time and wanted to talk to myself as a younger cinematographer, I think I would have said, hey, go find some people to collaborate with, and especially go find like a production designer or an art director or someone with that mindset, someone that can actually deal with the stuff in the background and make it look pretty. So when you turn on your camera, you actually have to do less work to get a better image. As a DP, you don't always have the ability to control everything that's going on in front of the camera. And maybe you don't even have the eye for all that stuff that might be going on in the background. Whereas an art director or someone like a production designer can really do that stuff for you, which is going to add to the tone and eventually better execute on the vision at large. Honestly, production design in the art department could be more important than you are as a cinematographer. Look at this A-roll setup as an example. It's kind of mostly black and white, but what if I set decked it a little bit? What if I, made this wall like a nice, navy blue color or something? What if I put on a contrasting colored shirt? What if I did some of that, put a plant in the background? These are the things that better create an image. In some ways, it's like if you're an artist that's trying to paint a painting, you need your set decorators, your production designers, your art directors to help you with the color side of it, the stuff that's going to go on back there, whereas you come in with your paintbrush, which is light. I was actually listening to a podcast recently with Eric Messerschmidt, who's the DP that often films for David Fincher, one of my all-time favorite filmmakers, and he was talking about Mindhunter, and he wanted to make sure that the production designers were getting a lot more of the credit than they usually get. He did light the spaces and was creating the tone, but the people that were doing the production design, picking out the colors of the suits that they're wearing and making sure all the walls are kind of this muted color, everything in that is kind of like a very muted palette, right? It's like either like a white, a yellow, a cream, or something to that effect. That's a lot of what's going on in the image and way less about what he's doing. Those vibes don't come from just the DP, they also come from other people on set. And DPs don't control that, but as a DP, you do have the ability to sometimes give your input. Like often when I'm doing a commercial shoot, sometimes the actor will come in, wardrobe will have picked out something for them to wear, and sometimes I'll be like, you know what, this would look a lot better if we could get a different color in the frame that would contrast better off the background or something to that effect. And I will talk with the director usually, and then usually go off to wardrobe and be like, hey, like they're wearing a white shirt, it's really bright, it's not popping off the background. Is there a way we could swap this out and still kind of fall in line with the vision that we planned in pre-production? And often you can just change those things. So it's that collaboration that really fine-tunes the image. And so the next tip is more specific to the cinematographer. It's more about the technical side of things. And that's of course our favorite subject, lighting. And I think the thing that you want to focus on most when it comes to lighting is shape and contrast. It's pretty common when you buy your first lighting setup or you're doing your first project that you set up a light just to get better exposure in the room, just to kind of even things out. And you're like, I know I need a light here. I know I need to feed light to the camera. And so you just put a light up. But really where you put that light has way more impact than the exposure itself. Where you put the light is much more important than how bright it is, what the color of it is, what kind of light it is. So the reality is we're shooting on a 2D plane. Images that you see on screen are 2D. But it's our job to try to create a more realistic image. Give it that 3D pop. So in order to do that, you generally want to put your light on the far side of your subject. This is going to add light, give you exposure, but also it's going to give you a shadow side closer to your camera, which gives you that 3D effect. That's what makes your 2D image look more 3D. And it's that shape that you really need to pay attention to. Now, ideally, I like to use soft light to create shape, and that's because we don't want our light to look too sourcey. We don't want our light to look like we stuck it up in the room and we're actually on some sort of film set, right? So in order to make it look more natural, you tend to want to soften it. Now, of course, there's always a place for hard light. Hard light does exist in reality, and you should definitely experiment with that. And it's much easier to get your contrast and shape with hard light, but I still much prefer a softer light. So then it comes down to, once I'm using a soft light, how do I get that shape back in? And that's really where all this problem solving comes from. It's like, okay, what's the intent? What am I trying to do? What kind of vision am I trying to execute? And then we get all that stuff in front of the frame, and it's like, okay, now how do I shape this to give it the most pop, to give it the most shape and contrast, so it looks more real to the audience and looks a little bit more 3D. So you might add pools of light in spaces so you have light and dark, or put light on your subject a little brighter than the background to let them pop on screen so the audience knows to pay attention to them. It's those types of things that really is what your job is when it comes to lighting. So we want that shape, we want that contrast, we want that 3D pop without distracting the audience. Which brings us to tip number 5, which is keep it simple. I find it so important to keep it simple. I think it's really easy to get caught up in the gear. And I mean, you're here on YouTube because you probably like gear, you're trying to learn something. It's really fun, right? There's a new gimbal out, there's a new drone out, it seems like every day. But when looking at some of my favorite cinematographers, the people that I look up to, they often just have their stuff like on a tripod or on a dolly. They're barely moving the camera. You don't want the gear to get in the way of the actual content at hand. An example was when I went to film for Adidas in London, and the idea was that we were going to shoot this kind of dynamic fashion film, and we wanted to use one of the first gimbals that ever came out to do this. But when we got there, you know, I'd used the gimbal before, but it didn't really work the way I expected, and it really started to slow us down. But that's okay, because it's me and the directors that are here to execute that vision. So I was able just to take another camera, not worry about the gimbal anymore, shoot handheld the rest of the day, and we were able to get through the day, fine, get all of our shots, and make a really cool spot, which helped me lean more into my compositions and how I was framing things. And in the end, I think the product really turned out better because of it. It's more important to think about those fun things, those gimbals and those drones and stuff like that, as a way to get the shot that you're trying to get, more than using them just to make everything more dynamic. Because in the end, you will get attached to them. You're gonna, like gimbals for sure, so you put the camera on there, now you're not gonna wanna take the camera off, and so now you're running around doing everything on the gimbal, when really maybe you only need it for a couple running shots or a couple walking shots. You just need to use it to better get the shot you're looking for, rather than leaning on it to make you look better. And this is how I am with lighting too. Sometimes you only need one light. You know, it's not about how many things you have, how much you're able to do. It's like, just what do you need to do? What is the best thing we need for the story right now? Which goes back to what I said earlier about natural lighting. Maybe you don't even need to put up a light at all. This just emphasizes that same point. I mean, I often ask myself, what's the simplest way to get this job done? Not what camera do I want to play with this week? What lenses do I want to use? It's what do I need to actually accomplish this? I just want to be able to capture the content in a way that's digestible for my audience. So I know I only said there would be 5 tips, but here's a little bonus tip for you. Have fun. I'm pretty sure that you got into this career because you wanted to have fun at your job, or you wanted to have fun to create content. And I think you picked the right career if that's what you're trying to do, because I think this is one of the best jobs in the world. You telling me we get to get paid to film cool stuff? That's an invaluable thing. I'm so grateful for this job every day. But it's that gratitude that you need to hold on to. If you start showing up on set and you're not having a good time anymore, it's probably because you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And I think it's important to know that you're probably going to do your best work if you're pulling something out from within, something from your perspective. You know, when you bring something from inside here to the table, not just doing something because you think you should, or because it looks cool, or because you saw someone else do that. First, you want to learn the craft, and then you want to try to take that craft and forget about it and just try to use it to bring out what's in here and bring it to life. Something that I live by, and especially now more than ever, because I think it's really easy to get caught up in this game, and you really start stroking your ego more than anything, and you're just trying to do the next coolest thing that you can. But in the end, that will not be fulfilling. I often try to think of things as, I want to get into this, not get through this. And you tend to be in the getting through category if you're just doing something for the wrong reasons. But if you can figure out how to get into something instead, then you're probably going to bring something that's in here that will help put a smile on your face or help fulfill you at the end of the day. So I encourage you to think about that always when you're going out to make your projects, make your films, do whatever you're doing. Do it for the right reasons, not because you just think you should. And I just like to be grateful. I think this really is one of the coolest jobs in the world, and I'm thankful for it every day. Okay, so those are my tips on being a better cinematographer today. But before we go, I want to talk about the supporter and sponsor of this video, which is Squarespace. Now, Squarespace is an all-in-one platform to present your work online. I think it's pretty fair to say that if you are in this career, you need a place to put your work. You need a website so other people can see your work and see what you've been up to. And that's where Squarespace comes in. Since the very beginning of my career, I've used Squarespace to build and maintain my website. And there's never been a reason to stray from that because they just make it so easy. All the tools are just there. You know, you can start with one of their pre-existing templates to get started and just throw your content in there, which is honestly one of the best things to do. But if you're really into your identity and you want to make it your own, they give you all the tools on the back end to do that. And what's great is, we're all looking at content on our phones these days, and Squarespace will automatically reformat your website for mobile devices. You can actually see how it will look on a mobile device or like something like a tablet or a computer screen. So it's not something that you have to redesign for every platform. This is just some of that awesome functionality that's built into Squarespace that helps get your website out of your way and is only there to help you and aid you in getting more jobs and more projects. So if you're anything like me and you need to present your work online, well, you can just do that with Squarespace. Click the link in the description to get 10% off, and I want to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Alright guys, as always, if you like this video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you liked this content. And until next time, I'm Spencer Sakurai. See ya.